Dissociative identity disorder, commonly referred to as multiple personality disorder, is a unique mental illness that has puzzled doctors in every field. While we understand more about the disorder today than we did a century ago, there are still many questions yet to have been answered. Additionally, many people believe that patients claiming to suffer from the disorder are lying to save themselves from trouble. This is especially common when it comes to criminals. In many cases, professionals evaluate serial criminals and confirm their claims of D.I.D. In other cases, however, it's more likely that the criminals are lying. Either way, these 5 cases show scary details about criminals apparently diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder. Number 5. A Jersey City man known as Dwayne Wilson lived an average life and rarely showed signs of violence. In fact, the only time he seemed to misbehave in the slightest was when one of his other personalities came to the surface. Although Dwayne wasn't diagnosed until after he was evaluated by a series of professionals, he suffered for many years from multiple personality disorder. It's unclear whether his family ever saw these symptoms, but the weight and burden followed him every day. In September 2005, one of Dwayne's alternative personalities came out to play and committed a disturbing crime. The personality, Kiko, attacked Dwayne's sister and her 2 children. He ultimately took the lives of all but one child named Paris. As the sole survivor, Paris called 911 to report what had happened. Dwayne was apprehended and immediately explained that he wasn't responsible. In fact, it seemed as though he had no memories of the crimes whatsoever. 4 years later, Dwayne's trials and hearings began to determine how he should be punished. A mental health professional performed a prior evaluation of Dwayne and his alleged disorder. The doctor found reason to believe that Dwayne wasn't lying and should not be held responsible for the crimes committed by Kiko. As it turns out, Kiko could have been legally considered insane and incompetent to stand trial, whereas Dwayne was deemed stable enough. In a turn of events, the prosecution team agreed that Dwayne was mentally ill. However, they still expected him to be put into an institution where he could receive the help he desperately needed before returning to the free world as an innocent man. Both sides of the case presented their arguments and requests. It seemed as though Dwayne would escape the long arm of the law thanks to his disorder. Sadly, the judge on trial didn't buy the idea that the suspect was suffering from anything and instead assumed he was simply putting on an act with his doctors and lawyers to avoid trouble. Because of this, the judge found Dwayne guilty and he was sentenced to 40 years in prison. A sad note to consider is how terrified and upset Dwayne likely was when he came back around and found that he, in a sense, was the cause of his own family passing away. Number 4. In this case, it's unclear if the suspects claiming to have D.I.D. were valid or not. Some believe he was putting on an act to evade the law, and others believe that he was inaccurately accused due to a judge's skepticism, since the overall disorder still needs more research and study. Either way, the case follows the story of a man from Texas named Billy Joe Harris, who carried out a series of assaults on elderly and disabled women. His victim count increased so much that he was eventually given a serial criminal nickname. It seemed as though his routine included him hiding in his vehicle a distance away from early morning locations that older women seemed to frequent, such as doctors' offices, coffee shops, and quick-stop stores. He would wait until they were alone and out of witness sight before he would overpower them and take advantage. In 2011, he was finally apprehended and faced countless charges in relation to his dirty work. During the trial, a psychiatrist evaluated Billy and reported to the court that he suffered from D.I.D. and had many alternate personalities. The doctor insisted that the evil crimes were the work of a mentally unstable and violent alter. This specific personality and overall disorder was likely caused by severe childhood trauma that was confirmed that Billy had endured. During his court hearings, Billy claimed that one of his personalities was a Great Dane named David, who committed the acts. In one hearing, he apparently summoned the personality of an unstable man that called himself Bobby. Witnesses in court described the show as cringy, as many of them had apparently stifled their laughter. The few incidents strongly opposed the prior claims of his disorder. Many saw these performances as valid evidence that Billy in no way suffered from D.I.D. However, it can be and was argued that there hasn't been enough research done on the disorder to accurately establish how the personalities are evoked or how they should or should not behave. Although his actions may have seemed cheesy to the present audience, there's no solid rules or symptoms that suggest a patient of D.I.D. couldn't function in a similar manner. Another popular professional in the field was originally called in to evaluate Billy, but stepped down because he felt he didn't know enough about the disorder to make valid judgments. He did, however, point out that it was peculiar Billy would adopt a serial criminal lifestyle so late in his life at the age of 54. Regardless, the alleged antics forced the jury to find Billy guilty in just under 10 minutes. Later in that same month, the jury stepped away for another short 10-minute deliberation to sentence Billy to life in prison. Number 3. In 1981, a 25-year-old woman named Juanita Maxwell was arrested for attacking and taking the life of a 73-year-old woman named Inez Kelly. When she was apprehended for the crimes, she was baffled to say the least. She had no memory of what had unfolded and pleaded her innocence, insisting that she had two personalities. At the time, D.I.D. was even more unheard of and studied than it was in later cases, meaning it would be hard to determine if she was telling the truth or not, and what form of punishment she should receive. Juanita was described as withdrawn, shy, and quiet, a young woman with perfect manners. However, she was also described as having little intelligence as she had not completed her schooling. Before her trial began, a social worker was assigned to evaluate Juanita and determine if she showed any signs of having a second personality. The social worker apparently took their time in communicating with Juanita and gently pulling her other personality to the surface. Finally, after many hours of tedious work and meaningless conversation, the second woman living within Juanita revealed herself. This alter claimed to be Wanda Weston and was very loud, outgoing, vulgar, and a giggly person, almost the complete opposite of Juanita. After this, she was given a series of tests aimed to evaluate the validity of Wanda's existence. Of course, these tests were fairly new and just short of thorough. However, the results showed that Wanda was real and Juanita had taken a back seat during her alter's time in the spotlight. Wanda shockingly bragged to the social worker that she had committed the crime and attacked the elderly woman because they got into a dispute over a pen. While Wanda couldn't confirm much about Juanita's life, she provided the results from these tests and conversations reported to the courtroom and used by the defense and prosecution to determine a reasonable punishment. Juanita was brought to the stand and coerced into transforming before the audience and the court witnesses. This transformation was unlike the previously discussed case, because when Juanita quickly morphed into Wanda, the audience and court officials were stunned and even horrified. They described the transition as unsettling and concerning. Apparently, it was sinister enough for a horror movie. After this performance, the court found her not guilty by reason of insanity. It was never confirmed if the court believed she had D.I.D, but they believed that she was insane at the very least. It was also noted that due to her lack of intelligence, it would have been impossible for her to manipulate a medical professional and fake the scores that she received on her tests. Number 2. This case involving a suspect named Billy Milligan is perhaps one of the most infamous cases involving D.I.D. It's also significantly older than most cases, making it rare for its time. In 1978, Billy was arrested and charged with several counts of attacking and taking advantage of victims, among a few other lesser charges. Early on in his trial, Billy's lawyers claimed that he'd suffered from multiple personality disorder, and that only 2 of those alternate personalities were the true criminals in the case. Such a notion was unbelievable and most unheard of at the time in history. There'd been a few isolated cases, but none of them were as severe as this one, or as notable. That being said, these claims were obviously difficult for most people to grasp, and the media flew to the cases like moths to flame. In no time, Billy's case was making headlines all over the world nearly every day. Billy was evaluated by a team of psychiatrists after these evaluations were made, and many of his medical files stated that doctors believed he'd come up with 24 different personalities, one of which was a 3-year-old girl. Although the media and many members of the public found Billy's alleged disorder to be a cop-out, the defense worked and Billy was found not guilty by reason of insanity. However, the judge did send Billy to a special mental health hospital where he could be monitored and treated with the specific care that he and his alters needed. Billy briefly escaped the hospital after a mental breakdown of sorts in 1986. A manhunt searched for him over the course of 4 months, and he was finally apprehended again and remained in the hospital until 1991, when doctors believed that he was finally stable enough to rejoin the free world. He passed away in 2014 after living many years in control of his disorder. Number 1. A man from Tennessee named Thomas Husky was apparently popular in the street worker community due to his job at a nearby establishment that housed elephants in the Knoxville Zoo. Because of this role and his generally outgoing personality, he was known as Zoo Man. This may paint a picture showing Thomas as a fun, lighthearted, and innocent guy. However, that turned out to be rather untrue when he was apprehended for a series of crimes in which he took the lives of 4 women. After being arrested, Thomas confessed to the crimes, and he was eventually linked to several more in the area, thanks to his operation style. He was also found to have taken advantage of and stolen from 2 other women that escaped with their lives. Despite the mountain of evidence, including his confession, Thomas's team of defense lawyers argued during his trial by claiming that an alternate personality of his, known as Kyle, was the true suspect in the case and that Thomas had no control over this alter ego. The jury didn't seem to buy the claims of medical professionals in this case, and the first set of charges, the ones that involved taking lives, were dropped due to a lack of consensus. A later trial was set for the crimes that included taking advantage of victims and robbery. For those crimes, the jury found Thomas guilty, and he was sentenced to 64 years in prison. It's rather unclear if he ever received the medical attention that he more than likely needed, though.